Ghosts and Goblins, Bionic Commando, Mega Man, Resident Evil. These are not works you generally put side by side, but they all have one thing in common. Tokuro Fujiwara had a hand in all of them, whether it be as a director in Ghosts and Goblins and Bionic Commando, or as a producer with Resident Evil, a game inspired by his own previous work on Sweet Home. What might be even more surprising is the hand Fujiwara had in MadWorld's game design on the Wii under Platinum Games. But even more overlooked than this outside of a lame internet meme is his work from his own studio, Whoopee Camp, with Tomba. Wait, no, play the other theme. No, the other theme. Nice. Tomba is a simple caveman, living his life out in the plains, hunting wild animals and generally loving life until one day a group of evil pigs steal the golden bracelet that his grandfather had left him to remember him by. With the sole motivation of getting that bracelet back, he heads out into the world to fight the evil pigs, lift the curses they've spread across the land, and generally help everyone he meets along the way. Tomba is a 2.5D side-scrolling adventure platformer with minor RPG elements and a ton of charm. It might not be as polished and tight as Klonoa is as a game, but what it does have is a larger scale adventure with a bit more meat to it. Before we really bite into that meat though, let's talk about the structure and bones of the game first. The main interaction Tomba has with the world is jumping on top of things, biting them as he lands on top of them. As soon as you land on an enemy or object, he sinks his teeth into them, locking into place. From here, you're allowed an additional jump with the ability to throw the enemy left, right, or down from your position. A lot of situations require you to throw one object into the other, or give you momentum when letting go at the right time. Physics weren't as much of a thing in the PS1 era as they are now, but the idea to have a higher amount of variance in movement was clearly something that was on the mind of a lot of developers after experimenting with momentum the generation before. Something I'd like to note is that once you're aware of the director's history, having made Ghosts and Goblins, the momentum behind Tomba's jump starts making more sense as a shared connection between the two. Tomba's jumps aren't quite as set in stone as your jumps in that series, but the curve of the jump and some of the commitment you find yourself in once you've landed on top of an enemy is certainly there. Jumping also lets you hold on to the side of a lot of objects, which lets you jump to other higher platforms. You also have the ability to jump into the background or foreground in some areas to make use of that 3D technology this new console generation afforded developers, giving a lot of areas more mileage out of smaller stages while making the world seem a bit more fleshed out. Besides jumping, you also have a main weapon that you can equip, with the major ones being boomerangs and blackjacks. Both serve more as a way to stun enemies before jumping on them rather than a direct way to take them out, though the stronger versions are able to take out some of the weaker enemies. There's also special pants that you can equip that upgrade your movement, like increasing your jumping capabilities or your running speed. This is supplemented by other items that you find along the way, like a parasol that lets you glide in the air. The unlocking of items like these aren't so much about unlocking new areas with the gimmick that lets you get to them, since this is an adventure game and not a metroidvania. So don't expect the typical high jump, double jump, or wall jumping stuff to pop up or open new areas. In most cases, these upgrades just make it easier to get to things you already could, and the newly covered ground they help you get to usually are just more of the map you're on, letting you access more of the items and content there and not so much giving you new areas to explore. Though what we've mostly talked about so far relates to this game as just a platformer, when Tomba is a lot more than just that. Everything in Tomba is an event. Events start and end with boxed letters showing up on the screen spelling out the name of the current event. Despite their naming, you don't actually have to do them immediately. They're not instanced events that lock you into a situation, functioning more like a general quest log, letting you keep track of what quests you have or haven't done yet. NPCs in a lot of locations have requests for you to bring them certain items, interact with certain objects, or just defeat certain enemies. These are all events, and most of them come with a clear reward afterwards. Clearing a lot of the events leads to other events, or in some cases, just straight progression towards the main quest or the next area. NPCs aren't the only source of events either. Often enough, you'll just stumble upon them in the wild, when seeing new types of interactables, or finding new obstacles to overcome. In the sense of a traditional platformer, this means a lot of backtracking. But in the sense of an adventure game, this means exploring the areas to find what items interact with what objects where, what new items they lead to, and where else you can apply those. It has that same feeling of going down the mental checklist in a Resident Evil title, but in a colorful platformer, which in a way makes the game feel like a big open toy box that has a lot of things to do and see. Though, to just say that Tomba is colorful is an understatement. The game is downright charming. Most of the dialogue from NPCs has a good sense of humor to it, and the game always avoids being dry in a very nice way. A good example is the first interaction you'll have in the game, where a villager tells you that you should read the signs in the area for hints, and the first sign is not only telling you off, it's telling you off in a way that actually leads to another event quite directly if you investigate it. The game isn't just offbeat due to the flavor text either. Every area has some weird twist to them that makes them unique and memorable. Especially while they're still under a curse by the evil pigs. The curses placed on areas creates a good reason for an area to be harder to traverse until you've effectively solved them, but it also adds an extra reward for clearing the game's content, as a new path often opens up by clearing the curses in them. Phoenix Mountain Storm being a curse that makes the area hard to get through is a good example. After clearing the area of its curse, the strong winds stop factoring into further exploring the area, making it easier to do side content and progressing through it later. Phoenix Mountain and Mushroom Forest especially have one of my biggest problems with the game though. Dropping down pitfalls takes a full life. This is more acceptable for a proper platformer where getting past the obstacles is the only goal in them. But in a title where you're running back and forth through locations to discover items and explore the areas for interactables, this is not a good thing. Phoenix Mountain has a lot of locations where you just want to jump down to see if there's any chests or items hidden below, with your reward for your exploration just being death a good chunk of the time. There's a few cases where there actually are items down there too, so the belief that there could be something down a pitfall wouldn't even be too off base. Mushroom Forest has an even worse take on this, with treasure chests hanging over pitfalls that make it easy to kill yourself opening them up. All they end up giving you is an extra life, so it almost feels like it's intentional, but that doesn't make it excusable. Add to this that the area comes with status effects that can make you laugh or cry, both taking control away from the player at random intervals, all while hovering over death pits with enemies that are coming at you. It makes for a pretty frustrating area to have to deal with. This doesn't mean that Tomba is all that hard though, but I'm not sure exploration in a game like this should be met with instant death, nor do I really think this game needs a hard game over screen. Lives are easy enough to come by, so it never becomes too much of an issue, but it's still strange that it's just there. My biggest problem with any area isn't even something as directly painful as that though. Being a PlayStation 1 title, there's a lot of pauses for the game to load the next area or screen repeatedly. There's a lot of cases where you enter a screen through a door and have to walk into another screen transition not even 5 seconds removed from it, causing another loading time. This is at least understandable though, considering the technical limitations of the platform, but even back in the day I remember getting really frustrated with the loading times caused by map rotating at the haunted house. Experimenting with early 3D like that isn't a bad thing, and I think in terms of map design a very good job has been done, but it's just a shame that the hardware limitations of the times hold the game itself back from how responsive and fast it could have felt, especially when the gameplay itself is so fast and responsive next to the sluggish load times. And yes, those load times also apply to Tomba's menus. Every time you equip an item in a menu, it automatically boots you out of it, so if you want to change more than one piece of equipment, you're going to have to sit through multiple waits for that menu to load every individual item. Thankfully the game isn't too equipment oriented, but the moments that it does happen takes a lot of the momentum away. Something that I have to absolutely hand to the developers is how good a job they've done at generally signaling the events to the player. As an experiment, I decided to just drop this game for a month to see if I'd be completely lost if I picked it up again later, because I was starting to get the feeling that the game would be next to impossible to pick up again after a long break from it. This review was actually supposed to come out before the E7 one, so that 1 month ended up becoming nearly 4 instead, and surprisingly enough, when I picked it back up, I had no trouble at all continuing from where I left off. The in-game event list, tracking what you still have to do, often with minor hints as to what those exact events actually are, did a good job of helping me piece together what I needed to be doing. Even though I intentionally stopped at what should be one of the harder parts in the game to leave it behind, dropping it in the middle of the Haunted Mansion sequence. Also quite like how everyone is generally confused about Tomba as a character within the game world. They often wonder about his hair color, or why he lives the way he does since his caveman lifestyle is very far removed from the rest of the setting. But at the same time, they don't really care enough to really want answers either. It's nice to see a game that acknowledges how offbeat it is without taking it too far or wanting to explain things too much. Though you'd probably also have a lot of questions if a purple-haired caveman walked into your home and spat up a bunch of animals that he'd been keeping in his mouth, so I get it. Something that I also quite like is how you can kind of categorize every part of Tomba based on the wise men in the game, especially the naming convention behind them. When you set off on your adventure, you're told to seek the 100-year-old man to give you guidance and help on your quest. Once you meet him, he hands you a 100-year-old key which can open special chests that are scattered throughout the world, and he tells you to seek guidance from someone much wiser than him, the 1000-year-old man. You probably get where this is going. It's a good gag that also gives you a good indicator of how far into the game you are and when you can expect to open what chests. The wise men generally have a chest that corresponds to their key in their homes as a good way to cleanly signal to the player which chest exactly it is that they can open from now on, without as much as saying a word as well. It's a very thoughtful form of progression done fully within the game's universe. What I don't get though is the boss fights. They all follow the same formula of needing to find a special colored pig bag in an area and then finding the special hidden door that leads to the evil pig who put a curse on the some location. The pig is never in the location that he cursed to try and tie the various areas together more in terms of progression, which is all perfectly fine. But then the fight itself comes down to grabbing the pig once and throwing it into a bag. After you've thrown it into a bag once, that's it, you've won. It doesn't really feel like a boss fight, which it's supposed to be, or even a real piece of content, and I think in most titles this would have been a minigame of some sort. A frustrating minigame at that, because the bag you have to throw them in is constantly rotating and there's usually stage hazards flying around the screen, while the evil pig teleports around the stage and can only be pinned down before a throw for a limited time. So how long it takes before you can put them in the bag feels in part random. It doesn't make for a satisfying fight against a boss and feels more like a chore you need to get out of the way. It's not really challenging either, though I guess they intentionally made it easy to survive in and only made you have to do one successful throw because they figured it'd be too frustrating otherwise. Though in general, the good outweighs the bad in Tomba. The platforming itself is strong, the areas are fun to explore, and the setting itself is well crafted and fun to experience. A lot of the pitfalls that it ends up falling for come from either being in new territory with not much else to compare it to, since the closest other platformers tend to come to this is being a metroidvania, and Tomba doesn't really focus enough on exploration or moveset expansion in the ways that that school of platformers does. The other big problem it faces are the technical limitations due to how the PlayStation 1 loads data, which, knowing the system well enough, could have been much, much worse. Considering how many years later there still haven't been too many titles just like it, or even similar, but all around better, I have to say it's still very much worth looking into if you're interested. Anyway, this was AboveUp. I hope you enjoyed this video, and yeah, I'm pretty busy lately. I already mentioned it the last review, but I kinda upped the workload for YouTube since then. I kind of want to try a release schedule of 2 reviews per month, so this is the first part of that. The first Saga review was supposed to come out 1 week later, but because there hadn't been a video in so long, I figured, what the hell, I'll just put it up right now as soon as I finish it. And I still made this video within the time frame that I would have otherwise made a next review, so I've proven to myself that I can't totally do this. It's actually not that stressful in terms of time, though Tomba is not a long game either, so we'll see how that goes. Besides this, I've been doing stuff on Patreon. Some of you might have seen that first Sonic High School video. Yeah, there's more of those, but they're going straight to Patreon. They're not paid videos, you can watch them for free just on the Patreon page, but it's just an extra incentive for people who like cursed content, because apparently that actually does drive money to Patreon somehow. People like curses, I guess. Besides that, I also have unlisted inner circle videos. They're smaller videos that I normally would have put up on the channel, but now I don't consider them good enough to be, you know, on the main page with everything else, so I just put them on Patreon, made them unlisted, and they're free to watch. So if you really want to watch more videos, you have more there. But they're basically just going over demos of like Resident Evil 2 or Devil May Cry 5. Also a short video going over all the combat and all the Kingdom Hearts titles that I've played. Just minor stuff like that. That is still... it's worth putting up, but I don't want to put it on YouTube in general and just flood everyone's sub inbox with like these smaller videos that I do, because back when I still did that, people did complain about that. As always, this video has been brought to you by the people you see scrolling on the screen right now. If you want to become one of those people and you want to see all these extra videos that I'm putting out and get notifications of them, you can head over to patreon.com/AboveUp, and yeah, I'll see ya.